I'm going to ask you if you would, I someone said this to me, or I heard someone say this years ago that we don't, for the most part, know how to breathe. And when I first heard that, I thought, well, there's probably something to it. But I'm an experienced breather. I've been, like breathing my whole life. Um, but there is something to that. Um, and it begins with just being conscious of our breath. So I'm going to ask you to take a moment and be aware of your breath, and try this practice with me. I want you to take in a deep breath and now hold and breathe in more, and then slowly exhale. Let's do it again. Take in a deep breath. Now hold. Take in more air. Slowly exhale. Let's do it one more time. Take in a deep breath. Hold. Take in more. Slowly release. Yes. So 10 minutes from where Diane and I are now, two rivers meet. The Liesbeck and the Black River. They come together in a very old neighborhood. There are trees, the sound of water. The ancestors of the Khoisan have known this region across tens of thousands of years. They prayed there, they lived there, they resisted there. In 1510, they fought off Portuguese colonizers on that ground. It is sacred land. And Jeff Bezos has built Amazon's Africa continental headquarters there. There was a years-long legal battle. At first, a court halted construction, then it allowed it to resume. Amazon found a way. Some of the indigenous leaders were promised a heritage center. The building went up. It's massive. It's still being constructed, parts of it. Amazon has moved in, glass and steel and capital rising where two rivers meet. A monument where a river once breathed. I've driven past a few times. Built on ground where the Khoisan prayed, over water that belonged to someone else. Glass, steel, capital, saying what empire has always said, this is ours now. And that's where I felt the question of the prophet Habakkuk. How long, O Lord? In fact, would you say that where you are aloud? Just fill your room. How long? So Habakkuk does not begin with small talk. He begins with a complaint. Listen to how he opens. How long, O Lord, must I cry for help, but you do not listen? I call out to you violence, but you do not intervene. Why do you force me to witness injustice? Why do you put up with wrongdoing? Destruction and violence confront me. Conflict is present, and one must endure strife. For this reason, the law lacks power, and justice is never carried out. Indeed, the wicked intimidate the innocent, and justice is perverted. Hear that. The law lacks power. Justice never carried out. The wicked intimidate. This prophet was not only describing 2,600 years ago, he was describing now. I have a friend named Nazia Hussein. Nazia was a member of the Santa Barbara Islamic Society. She lived in the United States for 18 years. She came first to New York for college, then to Santa Barbara, partly for work and partly, as romantics do, for a boy. That story did not end the way that she imagined, but Santa Barbara became home. Her sisters moved in. She built deep friendships. She found work that she cared about, the kind of life that becomes home before you realize it. But Nazia's immigration status became harder and harder to navigate, and this administration made everything more uncertain. At the same time, her 80-year-old father was in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Her younger sister was in Dhaka. Her mother died 5 years ago, and after that, she felt the pull more deeply to be there. For years, she had been thinking, someday, and then someday became now, this past November. Chosen and forced, both at once. She had been thinking about it for a long time, and this regime made later impossible. So about a week ago, she wrote me from Bangladesh, and many of us will recognize the breathlessness in her email. She said, between the horrific situation in Palestine, the unnecessary war with Iran, ICE, the current administration, AI's rapid acceleration, the increasingly unhinged greed of billionaires, the list goes on. It feels like we barely have enough time to catch our breath before the next crisis emerges. What frustrates me most is how these forces ripple far beyond the United States and affect people all over the world. Living in Bangladesh, I see those effects here as well. So Nazia is no longer in the US, writing from Dhaka, still watching the same storm, the breathlessness that doesn't stop at borders. It follows people across oceans. So let me ask you something. When did you first learn that the world was harder than you thought? For some of you, it was the day your parents sat you down and said, Mommy and Daddy still love you, but grown-ups sometimes have to live in different places. You were young. You didn't have words for your feelings, your own private earthquake. No one explained it well enough. And some part of you has been carrying what never got explained. For others of you, it was a death. Someone you loved was there, and then they were not. The world moved on, but for you, everything had changed. For me, it was a kindergarten classroom in San Francisco, 5 years old, the only Black child in the room, and the teacher let me know that I did not belong there. I didn't have the language that I have now, but my body knew, my spirit knew. Something in me understood that the world could look at a little Black boy and decide he was a problem. So in a season like this, when the news will not slow down, when each crisis arrives before the last one has even been mourned, when there's barely time to breathe, old sorrows come back up. Some of what we are feeling is not just about the news. Some of it is old grief that never got time to grieve. Some of it is the body saying, I have felt this before. The breathlessness of this moment is that as well. This breathlessness that we are experiencing is not accidental. There are people whose wealth has become a kind of weather. You may never meet them, but you live under their atmosphere. They buy land, they move money, they shape policy, they build platforms, they gather data, they promise convenience, and then sell the machinery of surveillance, of policing, of borders and war. This is a new colonialism, not always with flags, not always with armies, sometimes with contracts, with debt, sometimes with clandestine meetings, sometimes with glass buildings set down on sacred ground. The old empires took land. The new ones take land too, but also breath, time, attention, water, memory, imagination. The Amazon building 10 minutes from this house is a flag of a different kind. No flagpole, no fabric, just glass and capital and a river that no longer belongs to the people who named it. And this is why Nazia's list penetrates. She mentioned Palestine, Iran, ICE, AI, billionaire greed. Not the same suffering as old colonialism, not the same story, but the same logic. Extraction without accountability, power without tenderness, speed without mercy. And the speed is part of the violence. Keep people overwhelmed, keep them breathless, keep them scrolling, keep them grieving alone. A people who cannot catch their breath might forget how much power they still have, might forget how to gather, might forget how to resist, might forget how to pray. But Habakkuk remembered, and he prayed. He prayed, "How long, O Lord?" God's answer to Habakkuk is one of the hardest passages, I think, in all of Scripture, because God says, "I hear you, and what I'm doing may not be what you expected." Listen to what God says to Habakkuk. "Look at the nations and pay attention. You will be shocked and amazed, for I will do something in your lifetime that you will not believe, even when you are told about it." When the news comes in, that is. "Look," God says, "I am raising up the Babylonians, that ruthless and impetuous nation. They sweep across the surface of the earth, seizing dwelling places that do not belong to them. They are frightening and terrifying. They enforce their own brand of justice." So God's answer to how long is not rescue on Habakkuk's schedule. Not, "I have fixed it." Not, "the suffering is over." Not, "you will understand by morning." But God's answer is, "Look, pay attention. Something is moving among the nations. Something is happening that you cannot see from where you stand." And it's hard because when we ask how long, we want God to say, "Oh, pretty soon, not much longer. Give us a date." We want relief. We want justice. We want justice to move at the speed of our pain. But Habakkuk receives something more difficult, not silence, but not simplicity either. God gives him a wider horizon. God tells him history is not finished. God tells him empire is not eternal, but God does not give him control. So, dearest ones, I'm preaching this from Cape Town. We moved here 46 days ago. Our destination was our choice. But I am aware that for people like Nazia, and for the more than 2,000 people detained by ICE on the Central Coast since January 2025 in Santa Maria and Lompoc and Santa Barbara, The question of where to live was not theirs to answer freely. So today I am calling home to tell you what I see. And what I see is this: the prophet's question is still open. How long, O Lord? I see the law losing power in too many places. I see justice being bent towards the wealthy and away from the wounded. I see the wicked still intimidating the innocent. I see families being separated. I see sacred land being sold. See children being told in 1,000 ways they do not belong. I see immigrants being treated as disposable. I see technology moving faster than wisdom. I see billionaires dreaming of Mars while people on Earth cannot afford rent. And still I hear God saying, I am doing something in your lifetime you would not believe. Not because everything is fine, everything is not fine. Not because the wound does not matter, the wound matters. Not because we should be patient with injustice, no, but because empire does not get the last word. We are living inside that question. We have not yet arrived at the answer. And that is where we will live today, inside the question, because that is where many of us actually are. And the question deserves to be honored before we rush past it. So in a world like this, on a day like this, I want to ask, what does a father pass down when time itself has been stolen? What does a father pass down? Not the wound, or not only the wound, but what the prophet found inside the wound. As I close, let me just say, most of you know that my mother grew up in Jim Crow. My father grew up in Jim Crow. Starting at age 20 in California, mommy worked, she prayed, she sang, she poured centuries of struggle and hope into her children. She could not have imagined that her son would one day preach and write from the southern tip of Africa. My father, he joined the Navy. He wanted a country where his children would be respected. He saw signs of it, but he did not find it, not fully. Still, he kept dreaming it. That was one of the gifts my parents bequeathed to me. Not certainty, not arrival, not the lie that everything works out if you are good enough. They gave me something deeper, a way of standing in the long middle of things, a way of hoping without pretending, a way of praying without lying, a way of saying how long and still getting up in the morning. That is the inheritance. And that is what I would like to share today. So we will close for now in the open question: how long? Habakkuk did not receive an immediate relief. Neither did the Khoisan at the meeting of the rivers. Neither did Nausea in Santa Barbara. Neither did the families on the Central Coast that were separated. And neither perhaps did you in that classroom, at that kitchen table, beside that hospital bed, after that phone call, when the world first showed you its teeth. The question is not a sign of lost faith. Living in the question is faith. It is faith refusing to go numb. The question is faith still speaking. The question is faith standing in the ruins and saying, God, I know you hear me. Habakkuk did not stop praying when God's answer was hard. He kept going. He kept going. He kept going. So when we get to chapter 2, we will see where he went. But for now, on this day, here from the edge of the world, this father joins you in the prayer of that prophet. How long, O Lord? We trust that you are listening, God, even when we can't hear your answer. And while we wait, keep us human, keep us tender, keep us together, keep us brave enough to breathe, keep us brave enough to gather, Keep us brave enough to resist. And until you come, we'll say, how long? And would you again out loud, wherever you are, just say, how long? Amen. Thank you, Brigitte.
That was some meaty presentation that makes you want to sit and think for a moment. Is Matt on the call today?
Matt is not.
He is not. Okay, well, in that case, a couple of things stand out to me. I do want to just briefly back up to Jacob again, because while he was telling us about his dad and how his dad lamented that people didn't appreciate the working hero, that the working class hero that he felt so strongly was noble. It reminded me of last week when we heard about the just a grandma. And both of those make me want to cry, because it's like our society doesn't appreciate the people who are really the backbone and the infrastructure of our society, the people who mean so much and do so much. So thank you for bringing that up, Jacob. I really appreciate that. And then thinking about your sermon, Pastor Moore, and it reminds me of so many times that we look back on something that was very unpleasant, or something that we were disciplined for, or a job that we lost, or something that happened that just shook our world, but we didn't understand it at the time. And as years go by, not always, but sometimes we look back and we say, wow, I didn't realize that there was good in that. It didn't look good to me at all at the time. But in hindsight, we're like, wow, if you're a religious person, I look back and go, wow, God had my back and I didn't even know it. I thought I was being just abandoned, perhaps. But I wasn't. I was actually being put in a position that later worked out so much better. One example from my childhood is I broke my arm. And of course, as a child, you're like, oh man, what could be worse? You broke your arm, the whole summer is ruined. But in the process of going to the hospital for this broken arm, which was pretty serious, they had to put me to sleep and take an x-ray. And when they took the x-ray, they noticed a growth on my rib. And I thought later, when in the world as a child do you get a chest x-ray to see if there's anything lurking on your ribs? I mean, never. And so I was always grateful for that, because they were able to take care of that while I was a child. And there was no way I would have ever found out about it until something like that had turned malignant. Could have saved my life, breaking my arm.
Mm.
And in a similar way, when I first moved to Santa Barbara, I was not a happy camper. Those of you who know me have probably heard this story before, but I came from Washington State, which I considered paradise, to Santa Barbara, which I considered the land of evil and pollution. And so I was not happy here. And yet, I did feel very strongly that God had put me here for a reason. I didn't like it. I didn't want to be here. I gave up a lot of wonderful things. But it caused me to pay attention, like you were saying earlier, to pay attention because I felt like things were happening in my life that I did not understand. I had no, I couldn't see any good reason for coming to Santa Barbara. And and so it was very difficult, but because of that feeling that God had something for me there, I every single day was looking around. And I remember it was a very conscious time for me. I was every time somebody would say something to me or I would see something, I'd be like, is that it? Is that why I was put in Santa Barbara? And it made me look at everything so differently and to feel like you may not understand things now, but wait, God has a plan. And sooner or later, God willing, we'll find out what it is. And, right now it's kind of hard to see where we're going with this administration, but who knows? Like you said, things are changing. David, did you want to add something to that? Oh, I think you're muted.
Okay. What?
Yeah,
Am I
now
still?
now you're audible. Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry about that. I just wanted to thank Pastor for a very, very powerful sermon. Um, and I had this profound sense that you know the times we live in aren't so different from the times we read about in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
The French have this saying. It's one of those things like if the shoe fits, you don't have to complete it. You can just say, so the full expression is plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. So the more things change, the more it's the same thing. The more translated literally. So it really made me feel like we're buffeted by these incredible, immense forces that are not good, that aren't concerned about our well-being. And isn't that the story of the Israelites? They were bounced around between the Babylonians and the Persians and the Romans, very powerful forces that were malevolent and they had little control over. So I just had this very strong sense from your sermon that, we still are living in biblical times, so to speak. That's my comment.
As you say that, David, I think of um, you were pointing out how you don't have to say the second part of the saying, right? And when you said that, I thought of power corrupts, and we know it comes after that, right? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah.
I also really appreciated and was thinking about how you mentioned old grief coming back. And I think perhaps what's happening to us as a society is that our resilience is being worn away. It's like a sandpaper just taking away our protection. We may have something terrible happen to us or something impactful happen to us. And because you're strong and healthy, your body says, okay, I'm moving on. But when that protection gets worn thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner, I think that's when all those things come back up, and the wounds open up again, because you don't have the protection that your body had before. When we're young, we can take a broken bone or a scrape, but as we get older, some of those scar tissues come back and kind of grab us because we're not as strong as we were.
I think that's true. And it looks like maybe Linnea raised her hand. I can appreciate the quietness of everybody, even though we welcome every voice. I can appreciate the quietness. It's like this is a moment, as Brigitta mentioned, it's a moment to take it all in, to sit with everything. So were you going to comment, Linnea?
I was just trying to figure out why. I'm just kind of processing, but I was also trying to figure out why there's a big X.
I was wondering about that too.
And
maybe
then
that means she doesn't want to talk. I don't
know. And then down where it says, where'd it go? Where the little heart is down, reactions, it says no.
Okay.
I don't know what that is. I'll get that to mean I should just not talk.
Maybe if you press on the little X in the reactions again, maybe it'll go away.
Yeah.
Or you'll get two.
I don't know what to hit, but I'll just ignore it. I guess it's not doing anything. It's just there. Sorry.
I think that is part of the sandpaper that's wearing away at us as well.
Technology.
is technology. It used to be you could just talk to somebody, and now you have to figure out, why is there a no on my and why can't nobody hear me?
Yeah, constant battle, huh?
And why can't I connect? And
Diane,
so
was your hand? Oh, I'm sorry.
Bonnie's hand is up, and I think maybe okay. Diane.
How about Bonnie?
Bonnie, go ahead, and then I'll chime in. Maybe I'll chime in while Bonnie's getting unmute. There you go.
Sorry, I had this thingy come up and it says the host wants something, and I couldn't. Anyway, no, I think the statement that David said a second ago about everyone's so quiet. I think we are at that point where we're just sitting and thinking about stuff, and like with this technology stuff, AI is going so fast, it's scary as hell. But the sandpaper thing, I've been worn away too. I mean, I've learned all I can learn. that I'm able to learn with technology. I know there's a lot more to learn, but this is just, I can't handle it. So I just don't do much. But I wanted also to say, you said something, David, a little bit ago about when did you lose your I won't say virginity, your innocence? When did you lose your innocence with life? And or from life. And mine was a quick story. At 9, I was in a body cast. I had a spinal fusion. In those days, you were on it. You were in the cast for 11 months. This wasn't something you took off. It was just
Gosh.
it was plaster. You just had to deal with it. Okay, well, and there were a bunch of us kids that had to have it done at the same time. We all had scoliosis. We had, and this is in Pasadena, California, and we all got to have little parties on our ward and stuff. But after I got home, we all went our separate ways, and we traded all names and addresses with each other and all that. And probably a month after I got home, my mom got a phone call, and she came out from her room and said, "Bonnie, I have to tell you something about one of your friends in from the hospital." And she had asthma really bad. She was a teenager. She was older than me at the time, but she had asthma really bad. And in those days, in 1965, things were you were up shit creek because the ambulance won't come or doesn't come, or there was no 911 stuff. This poor girl, she had a really bad asthma attack one day at home, and she died because they couldn't get the cast off.
Oh,
She That is the worst thing. I had the same cast on, and I don't have that asthma, but it's like, holy crap, this is. And how many other kids had to put up with that crap, at that time. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Mhm.
Diane?
yeah. Thank you, Pastor Moore, for that. And what I hear is not just being worn down, but the sandpaper may be sharpening the tools to resist. I see a lot of resistance going on. I see a lot swelling up as well as wearing away. I hear the call of how long. He doesn't stop with the calling out, he goes on. And I think that's important, not to let ourselves be discouraged or worn down, but to be sharpened and to join together. What's the other, we're good on sayings here today. What's the other saying? When the people lead, the leaders will follow. And I think, yeah, just not to not to give up, but to keep calling out and joining hands and joining in the work. There's work to do.
Well, you're reminding me that, Habakkuk, he raised the question, how long? And we're called to live in the question when we don't get immediate answers. And that is our calling. That's where we stand. That's where we will grow strong.
Yeah.
Against all odds. Sheila's hand is up.
Just wanted to make a statement that we colonized, indigenous, the people who struggled, who are always fighting and always waiting. Always fighting and waiting, and not fighting physically, but fighting, who have had to live in multiple worlds, different worlds, just to continually survive, and still somehow have to come up with joy. We live in Habakkuk's question. We lived in that question all of our lives.
mentioned the joy, and I think of that song. The world didn't give it.
The world can take it away.
Right.
One thing that I've noticed in just the last few weeks, there seemed to be more social media attention to building bridges between the two political parties. And I have not heard that for decades. It's always been, this camp, that camp. But lately, I've probably seen maybe 5 or 6 different people say, you know what, we got to overcome that. And I think that's a hopeful message, and maybe one that wouldn't have actually been vocalized and come to the front if it wasn't for all the disastrous things that are happening right now. But I do see that as a hopeful sign.
Some people think that the United States will never be able to recover, or maybe even the world won't. But as an empire, some people say, well, it's time. We've done enough damage globally. And but for me, it doesn't really make a difference in how I act. I still will resist with my joy. I'll still resist any way I can. I'll still hope. And that's kind of all. I mean, I don't feel despair. I've been talking a lot with my Egyptian sister-in-law, who is pretty much an atheist, and about it, but she just is so despairing about what's happening in Egypt and the Middle East, and rightfully so, but I became more aware of the lifting that God gives, even when we see the end to things, or the possible end to things as we know them. Anyway, that's something I'm musing about lately.
Well, thank you for those very profound thoughts. And thank you, Brigitte, for launching our conversation. Kenichi's going to lead us in tender communion. I see Ana Rosa's hand too. I don't know.
Go ahead, Pastor David. I can do it after.
Ana Rosa?
Yeah, sorry, I was very late, so I don't know if you all talked about Cohen Wiley at all today.
No.
He's a 1-year-old baby boy that got killed, and he's just been on my mind and my heart every day, and I don't understand why there's not a bigger outcry about what happened to him. But I just wanted to lift up his name and his family in prayer for us as we move forward with our service today. Because I feel like we should be in the same place as we were with George Floyd, and not enough people are saying his name.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ana Rosa.
Yeah.
Thank you for that reminder, Ana Rosa. Well, today was pretty heavy stuff. One thing as we approach the Lord's table, one thing as I was meditating on things that were being shared, this thought came to my mind. The reason why Habakkuk was able to ask genuinely, how long, was because he was very much in touch with his humanity and that of those around him. Without being in touch, there's no way anybody will be asking the same question. Definitely not Elon Musk or any of the oligarchs that want to set their own course, their agenda. They're not asking that. But they are, if I remember correctly, even the blood that's been shed, Colin Wiley's. And then I was also thinking about the many, many dads of Gaza, of Beirut, southern southern Lebanon. And also we have to remember the Alawites of Syria and of course the West Bank. Then I also think of Mazen, Kumseya, who continue to share the voices that are coming there. And behind all that is how long. So having said that, as we take the broken body of Jesus and his shed blood, may we stay in that question and continue. I know it's difficult. I know for me it's sometimes very challenging, but to stay humane, to be in touch with my humanity and that of others. So let's do that. Let's together encourage one another as we take the elements to stay in that space. How long? The body of Christ broken for each one of us. The blood of Christ that was shed for each one of us.